All right, Bill. So this is really fun for me because I have played the true or false games on your
Ah,
Instagram for a long time. And
good.
yeah, so there's that. I love when I get them right. It makes me feel like I'm really doing something. But in all seriousness, I really have enjoyed just listening and learning just how you break things down and make these studies really applicable and understandable. And that's one thing that I really admire about you and your knowledge. And of course, I've kind of followed your work through knowing like Lauren Conlin and people like that. So anyway, thank you for taking the time. I know you're busy. But looking forward to this. So question for you, just to kind of dive into this. I would like to know how you got into just this field. Why fitness? Why health? Why that?
Okay, so the one word answer would be bodybuilding. There's a little context to that. So when I was in my 20s, loved bodybuilding. I loved lifting weights. I love sports nutrition. And I graduated with a marketing degree. And I'm old enough that the marketing degree was pre-internet, or internet was just coming on the scene. So no digital marketing, no real email marketing. So this was like Yellow Pages days. I don't know if you remember that.
I do.
So totally different degree. I was in a career selling bug killer, weed killer. I'm like, I don't love killing bugs and I don't love killing weeds. What do I love? Well, I loved bodybuilding. I loved exercise, nutrition. So I decided I need to go back to school, get anatomy and physiology and organic chemistry, like all of the courses. And I didn't know what I thought I might work for a supplement company. But the more I was getting a master's and then I started a PhD program, the more I realized the biggest impact I can make in this space is through research and conducting research. So really feel like I was created to do this, and I'm very blessed by God to have a lab where I get to research what I want to research, get to talk to students about my passion. So that's the story.
So, when I think about just I mean, how many studies are you actually involved in right now? Like, how many different projects do you have your hands in? Or do you kind of just do like one at a time? What does that workload look like?
So studies that we're currently creating right now is two. The number of studies that I have my fingerprints on is probably like 15, 20. Like it's because I do some collaborations. I manage some position stands for International Society of Sports Nutrition. Plus I do international collaboration. So I've got but my own lab, we're planning two. One of them's a large study, but my fingerprints are on 10 to 20 different studies at this moment.
Nice. Cool. And we'll dive into some of those and I'll probably pick your brain on whatever you can share. But I wanna make sure that when coaches are listening to this, they're getting some tangible information that they can take to their clients, right? And so while I work with coaches that are doing anything from more of the hormonal and functional type stuff to the bodybuilding, a majority of the coaches I work with are doing Gen Pop, right? Fat loss, things of that nature. And so I know you sent me a few of your issues, which was great to look at. And you mentioned this protein intake directly enhancing physique, right? And I was looking through that, and again, very easy to read, but how would you encourage a coach to get their client to eat more protein, right? And help them understand why that alone would be a game changer, kind of going through this study and what it showed.
Okay, so the and I literally just talked about this to my students 30 minutes ago. I view your job as a coach is to not make your clients get a specific number of grams of protein. Now we can have goals, but I view the coach's a coach is successful if they're able to help a client get more protein intake than what they would normally do without your assistance. Now, this assumes a client is not getting much protein to start with. If I'm working with physique athletes who are already getting, a gram per pound, there's not much, we're not going to really improve upon that. You can get more protein, but the value, the volume to benefit ratio at that point is almost nothing. So if you're working with what I would say somebody who's new to fitness or somebody who doesn't currently eat a lot of protein, which by the way, bodybuilders find this hard to believe. That's almost everybody. Bodybuilders are a unique subset of our space. And I love bodybuilders. It's who I learned the most from. but most people aren't bodybuilders. So how do you get people? Well, one, you just say, let's have you eat more. So that from a food first perspective, that would be something like, hey, how often do you eat eggs per week? If they say one time, well, if you have 2 eggs, can we go to 3? Can we have eggs, 2 days per week instead of one? Do you get chicken breast on your salad? Can we get double chicken breast on that? So those would be like food first options. And I'm a big proponent of protein supplements for this exact reason. They're easy. It's a lot easier to carry a scoop of protein than an extra fillet of salmon in my lunchbox. So it's quick, it's convenient, relatively inexpensive if it's a high quality protein. So that's what it would be. So can we get you to do a food first approach? Okay, that we'll take that so far. And then will you consider a supplement that we can add to this? And that's the easiest way to do this.
And this study basically showed you didn't change any of the calories, you just swapped out the nutrient profile, right? So tell me like how long that study was and what it showed, because I
Yes.
think that some people listening are very analytical and want to hear that.
Yes. And let me make sure I set the context. So this was not a study that I did in my lab. So you're talking about a study in my
Rather,
research
yes,
review,
yes,
which I just summarized for people.
correct.
Now, I have done protein type, we've done several studies similar to this. Um, but this particular study, what they did was they took females who were getting on average about 0.5 grams per pound of protein or about 1.1 grams per kg. And it's really awesome study. I mean, and I love simple studies. I don't like complexity at all. And what they did, they said they put them into 2 groups. They randomized them into 2 groups. And they said, okay, one group, the only thing we want you to do is increase your protein. That's it. So you're going to increase your protein and we're going to reduce your carbs so that you're not changing your total calories at all. That's a very simple change. The other group, they said, we don't want you to change anything. You're going to keep eating this relatively low amount of protein. Again, 0.5 grams per pound or about 1.1 grams per kg. They followed them for about 12 weeks, no exercise intervention. Again, the only thing they did was just manipulate protein and they lowered the carbs. And at the end of the 12 weeks, the females gained a significant amount of lean mass and they lost a significant amount of body fat. And that is not the only study to show that. I did another study a couple months later in my research review. There are other studies. And let me just say this. If I'm a coach working with a new client who's new to fitness, that is the lowest hanging fruit you can possibly introduce to somebody's diet.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny because I am going to ask you a little bit about marketing later, but one of the things that I always talk with my clients on is, even though protein is a low hanging fruit and people do need more protein, just saying things like 5 ways to get more protein in, like that's going to keep you so blended in, like you will not stand out by saying those things. So it's always, I like your very specific examples of, adding this here or doing this here, right? I'll tell my clients to create something along the lines of, I don't know, 5 ways to get more protein in the morning in 5 minutes or less, whatever, right? Something where it's like you're hitting on a pain point, I think. And so understanding, like when we go through these studies, we're targeting a few of the, in my opinion, like Gen Pop studies, right? That are going to make sense. But then when you're listening to this, coaches, learn how to market it to the person you're trying to get on your roster. And then the semaglutide. So I'm bringing this up and I read what you sent over, but I feel like this has been such a hot topic and it continues to stay a hot topic, right? And so, I mean, what are your thoughts with how readily available semaglutide is before we even dive into like it working, how it works, things of that nature, who it's for, who it's best used for? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm told it's very available. And if you're a rich person, you can get it this afternoon.
Yeah.
You almost in any community, it seems like, or within driving distance. If you have the money, there will be a provider that will prescribe it to you. Now, I'm just telling you what, because I have a lot of conversations with people on a lot of different fronts, and that is what I'm hearing. I was in my own mall, like my outdoor mall. This was probably about 2 or 3 months ago, and I saw this store. And again, this is where, this is 3 miles from my home, took my kids there their entire lives and walking with my family. And I saw this like weight loss store. And I'm like, oh, I gotta go in there because I'm a fat loss scientist. So I love weight loss stores. And I'm like, I wonder what this is. Of course, my daughters and my wife bored out of their mind. Hey, we're gonna go look at shoes. I'm like, all right, I'll catch up with you. And I walk in and I say, what is this? And I see all these like concoctions on the wall. And then I realized what it was, and it was an Ozempic or these GLP-1 agonists. It was to prescribe that. And I'm like, wow, this is in my neighborhood, my own mall. And I'm convinced, and again, I had a bunch of annoying questions for the person behind the desk, and then the doctor came out. My impression was, without pushing it too far, I could have walked out of there with a prescription to lose weight. And I mean, I'm not lean. Um, I'm not, well, maybe I am obese by BMI standards, but let's move on from that. That my impression was I could have walked out of there with a prescription.
So in terms of utilizing semaglutide in research you've found, right? Who benefits the most from this? And who is most harmed by this?
People who benefit are the people who take it, apparently. It I am amazed. And again, I don't want to have a lot of hyperbole. I don't want to be overly dramatic. This is the most powerful weight loss drug we have ever had in existence. It is a powerful appetite suppressant, and I see this in the research, and I see this from people that I'm talking to. There's a lot of fitness professionals taking Ozempic. A lot of people would be shocked to hear that. Now, not all of them, because they reach out to me. Not all of them are public about this, but people would be surprised how many people are taking these medications, these anti-obesity medications. So the people who get the biggest benefit are the people with obesity who need to lose an excess amount of adiposity. So that's where we're seeing the biggest drop of body weight. The first study that I discussed this in, I think it was last summer. After a year, subjects that were on the medication lost 15% of their body weight versus about 2.5% from those that were dieting and exercise. So it's powerful. And there's a lot of fear around this. I'm under the impression that fitness professionals are kind of putting their heads in the sand because they want it to go away. It's not going away. It is, I'm always trying to say, you may not like it, but we need to embrace it, and we need to help people that are considering it, people who are on it, people who want to get off of it. There is an opportunity for fitness professionals to help people considering this or that are on it.
Yeah.
I don't think I could be any more clear. It is not going away.
And I've taken it, so I can definitely speak on like the side effects and all of that.
Oh,
But
I would love to. Yes, we've
yeah,
got to fit in a few minutes so
we
you can
can
tell me the
fit
side
that in.
effects.
Yeah. So I mean, just quick backstory. I was a bodybuilder and all of that, power lifter for a long time, and lots of trauma, lots of stress in 2020. Long story short, I gained about 45 pounds in 90 days. Didn't know why. I was eating everything I should have been eating. I was working with a phenomenal coach. My body just kind of said, hey, we're done. Cortisol was flatlined for about 2 years. Hormones were awful. So needless to say, I tried fixing things on my own for about 2 years. Got cortisol curve back to normal. Hormones still weren't really coming up. Insulin sensitivity was a little bit better. I was checking my blood sugar every morning. Ultimately, I was ready to lose the weight. So my coach has his own clinic. We started using semaglutide. I did a pretty low dose, to be honest, but the weight came off in about 6 months, like all of the 45 pounds. That was 2022. Since then, I have actually lost an additional 10 pounds. Like it stayed off, just health and diet. But I'm somebody that's very, very on it with tracking their food, and I have the habits and the lifestyle, right? And so my worry just comes from the people that are getting it from these med spas or whoever. I have a girlfriend who recently just randomly got it, right? And she's, I would say, about 60% compliant with the diet and all of that. And right off the bat, they were wanting her to take like a pretty significant amount, like dosage wise. And this is somebody who is like relatively, I mean, pretty fit, like 150 pounds, like muscular, like not a big person, wanting to take a pretty high dosage. So that's what my fear is that nobody is working with people to come off of it slowly. right? And because it is a crazy appetite suppressant, I will tell you right now, I had like very bad meat aversions. Like I didn't want like ground meat. It was just like gross. So I was pretty much eating breakfast foods for every meal of the day. But otherwise, I mean, I knew I had to eat, so I did. I still got the macros in, but that would be my question for you is, have you seen anything come out showing just like weight regain afterwards or what that looks like or any studies on that?
Yeah, so I don't, not to keep talking about my research review, but this month's research review, that's exactly what I did. So I summarized the study, the first study that I'm aware of, and this was semaglutide, where they had people taking it and then they took them off of it, or actually gave them a placebo. And the people that continued to take semaglutide for a year continued to lose weight, and then that plateaued in the last few months out to about a year. The subjects who were switched to the placebo, they gained not all of the weight back, but the weight loss stopped and they gained back some of their weight, such that at the end of the year, they still had some weight loss compared to when they started. So the research reports that when you stop taking it, you gain the weight back. Now, again, I generally see the world as two types of people: recreational bodybuilders or physique athletes, somebody like you who's fit, you have a fit mindset, and then people who aren't active, who don't have a fitness profile. So these studies are all in the latter category, who aren't, fit, who aren't really tracking macros, who aren't logging workouts. So in that population, the data suggests you stop taking it, appetite comes back, you gain some of the weight back. You continue to be on it, you maintain the weight loss.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really think it comes down to, not that I'm going to argue anything with research, but any one of either my clients or people that I know in the industry that have taken semaglutide and lost weight and kept it off, they're just very adamant about their reverse diet, and it is, I will say, I remember telling my coach, I was like, man, that was the easiest diet I've ever done. I mean, I wasn't hungry, it was great, like perfect, so easy. But coming off of it, because it's a weekly injection, I mean, by the time you take your next injection, not that your entire appetite is back, but it definitely wears off. Like you kind of feel that. And so whenever you're starting to feed up more, making sure you're weaning off of it, right? But I have not noticed any more weight gain than a normal reverse diet that's taken seriously versus like a dirty bulk type of a reverse diet. But I'm curious because again, like the people that are accessing this are not just people like myself. It's the people that are just trying to lose weight and they just stop eating because they're not hungry, and that's where you see all this like muscle loss and everything else. And so I'm just curious to know your thoughts on that with Gen Pop.
Yeah, so I interviewed two physicians to give me, hey, I summarized the study. Physicians, how you prescribe this? What are you seeing? And the specific question I asked them was, do you taper people off this? Like, when you prescribe it, do you have an end game? And I love the answers that we got. The one just off the top of my head, he was saying, yes, people need this kind of, especially if they've had multiple failures with using fitness and dieting to lose weight. This is a great kickstart to give them weight loss success. But in his philosophy, and he's a fitness doctor, he has no intention of them remaining on this. Let's get them to a low weight, and then we can taper off. That might have been what you did. And then ideally they're off of this, and then hopefully they're working with a coach that's imparting on them lifestyle habits so that they don't need to rely on this. Because again, the side effects are, well, they're varied, but they're very common side effects. So I love to see the physicians, especially the ones that, again, that embrace more of like a muscle-centric medical approach, getting people on it, and then a plan to get them off of it after a period of time.
It's just so interesting to me because like you said at the beginning, and I won't harp on semaglutide much more, but it's like, it's not going anywhere. And so I think that this hard stance from coaches that I see with like, you shouldn't take it, don't take it, I don't agree with that. I think you have to be very smart about who takes it and understand that you are going to start getting clients that are already coming to you taking it. because it's so easy to get. So if you tell them no, they're going to go get it somewhere anyway. So you may as well learn how to use it responsibly, or because it's not going anywhere, right? So, cool. So my other question for you, it's not really study related, but you may have thoughts on it, but this whole movement with weight loss resistance, some people are like, that doesn't exist. Some people say that it does. I'm curious to know your thoughts on this. So the idea that people are unable to lose weight, no matter if they're in a caloric deficit or not, due to either long-term bikini competitions, competing, jeopardized hormones, things like that. I don't know if I'm assuming you've seen the wave of this, but curious to know like what your thoughts are on that, because some people are thinking like, well, no, just eat less, or it's just a calories in, calories out thing. But I'm curious to know your thoughts on hormones and weight loss, right?
Yeah, so I have an opinion on this. A lot of this is observational, but I always start with, well, what does the research say? So if somebody is weight loss resistant, so they believe they're in a caloric deficit and they're not losing body weight, what do I learn from the research? And there's two things there. The research would suggest, which a lot of people don't want to hear, is that overwhelmingly the reason why people are not losing weight is because they're not adhering to a caloric deficit. So that's what, again, whether that's 70% or 80% of the time. I tend to say, okay, I acknowledge that, but I'm also acknowledging there are people that I think are in a caloric deficit, and for whatever reason, they're not able to budge the scale anymore. So what do we do in that case? Well, the other explanation would be a metabolic adaptation. So the person has been dieting for a long enough period of time such that their metabolic rates, their energy expenditure has been suppressed. So what used to be a caloric deficit is no longer a caloric deficit. And there is arguments in the research literature, know that metabolic adaptation doesn't exist. There's other studies reporting, you can actually showing that it does. And then we have a group of, I'm just going to say middle-aged women in the perimenopause age that also, this would be the loudest contingent of people that are, I'm not losing weight, and I'm starting to immerse myself in this space. I'm planning some research in females going forward in this space. And that appears to be, and again, I don't have the answers to this. I just, some of these, well, one, my wife should be the best example. My wife was fit her whole life, tracked macros. I put her through multiple dieting. I'm a fat loss researcher, so I like to do experiments on my wife. And she puts up with
Is
it.
she like that? I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So she was in perimenopause, and for the first time ever, and again, this is somebody there, I coached my wife through multiple dieting cycles, and my wife's never been overweight. She would just get real lean for a while, gain some weight back, and we would try another diet, and she was hitting a wall. So there's a lot going on here. Now, I don't have the answer, but I believe there is something to this phase of life in females, early 40s, late 40s, 50s, going into menopause, that make it very difficult. Now, that's not to say, let's just lower your calories more, you'll lose weight. Yes. But if they're eating, if I had to put my wife on 900 calories per day, that's just not a maintainable approach for her, where she would used to lose weight at 12 or 1300 calories. So I don't have answers, but I am committed to immersing myself in to find answers in that population.
It's
I
such a
don't, I believe people that say it
yeah,
again.
and I said such a trending topic right now, weight loss resistance. That's been a term that's come out in the last few years, right? And I ask you that because I know so many people, usually it's women that have competed for a while, right? Or either they're under like a crazy high amount of stress, but I'm specifically talking about the women that are in the bodybuilding industry, that have maybe gotten out and sure, they were eating low calories, or maybe they're going into a prep and for whatever reason, like they're adhering, they're not binging, they're sticking to their stuff, but they're just not budging. They're not getting stage lean, or the rebound, right? Which is kind of like what I experienced, where my hormones were completely tanked. And I was just rapidly gaining weight on like 1600 calories, which had never happened before. So I'm always curious because I know there are people that say like, I don't know if that was metabolic adaptation, but it felt like 2 years of hell. So I don't know. But it's interesting to get the take on that, right? Because um and I don't know if you've done any studies on that, but I think when you've got kind of a hormonal mess to clean up, it does make weight loss really challenging, right? Regardless of the age. But would be curious to know, because it's just a topic that is definitely trending, but I can see it going a really bad way, right? Like, let's say you have a client and they're like, I swear I'm doing all the things, and you're just assuming that it's weight loss resistance, and you're like throwing all these labs at them when they don't even need that. They just need to get more steps in and drink water. You know what I mean? And
Yes.
track the extra cookie that they eat every night but don't want to tell you about. So I can see where it goes both ways, absolutely, but was just curious to know your thoughts. And moving into this segue too, this wave of everyone wanting to call themselves functional now. Have you seen this trend where everyone is
I
like,
think so.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So what are your, and I guess that's kind of this is just me asking you of your observation of the industry, less than a study, or not really study related, but where I'm getting this wave of working with coaches and they're feeling very inadequate if they are not equipped to review labs and do things like that. And so, and again, I guess it depends on who you follow on social media and who kind of like is in your circle, but I definitely see a mass amount of people moving into like the gut health space or the functional space because they feel inadequate working with Gen Pop. They're like, well, I don't know if I can scale this. I don't have enough skill set, right? And they're diving into these other things when they're not really well equipped for that. So I'm just curious to know if you've seen that trend or what your thoughts are on that, because really Gen Pop needs us more than anyone.
Yeah. My I struggle with this. That space is where a lot of the charlatans camp out. The and I don't know how else to say that, but that doesn't mean that there aren't some good coaches that are in that space and that are doing good things and helping people. So I'm not, that's not to throw a broad net over the entire coaching space, but that hormones are, it's hard. If you try to learn like just even cortisol, I had my entire class say, "Come, you find research that tells me that reports that high cortisol is going to lead to weight gain." Well, they couldn't find any, and that backed up what I found. So we know that cortisol, we don't want chronically high cortisol, but I just wanted some research studies to support this. I couldn't find any.
So
And now,
are there research that supports adrenal fatigue? Because that's another one too, right? Like weight loss resistance, adrenal fatigue, those go hand in hand. So I'd love to know more about that.
yeah, and I'm a little outside my expertise, but adrenal fatigue is a term that physicians, especially endocrinologists, they would say that's made up. There may be such a thing as adrenal insufficiency. And I look at this again, probably a more cynically, but I don't even want to apologize for that because I'm a scientist and people want their scientists to be cynical. I'm a very cynical person. Like if my wife says I love you, I'm like, well, no, you don't. Like, show me nine reasons why you love me. Like
We're the
that's
same. We're the same. I need proof.
yeah, yeah. So the world needs people like us. But I look at like, okay, so adrenal insufficiency. Not saying that there aren't problems, but that means that it's been worked too much and now it's not functioning. Well, if you exercise, is there such a thing as mitochondrial insufficiency or mitochondrial fatigue? Because every time you run or walk, extra steps or you lift weights, you're taxing your mitochondria. But yet I've never heard anybody say, well, there's mitochondrial fatigue. It doesn't happen. So again, there's a lot of money to be made. This is my cynical self. There's a lot of money to be made by acting like an expert. And who I think this preys upon the most, and I'm going to come back and say it doesn't mean that there aren't people being helped, but it's people who don't have all of their ducks in a row. Like they are not necessarily tracking macros very close or missing a lot of workouts. And there's people who say, it's not that, it's my adrenal glands, it's my hormones. That's not to say that it's not, but I believe that you take probably 80% of those claims are not those things. Doesn't mean there's probably I believe there is a subset of people. Earlier, you said like a lot of this weight resistance is in former bodybuilders and physique athletes. Well, those are people that I trust with their macros. Like if they're telling me they're eating low calories, I believe them. If I have a new fitness client who's never been in a gym and they're saying, hey, I'm dieting, I don't believe that. The research says, no, you're probably 30% overestimating or underreporting what you're eating. But these bodybuilders, so let me just say, Taylor, I don't like not having an answer. And I think there's some fraud, charlatan, and there's some truth, and there's some people that are suffering that need advanced help. I will say this, my research is much more on let me help the largest, the general population. What do they need? And hopefully I can be a lighthouse for them. Like, let's not start with your hormones. I gave a lecture online recently where I called it an energy balance audit. And I gave some strategies. Okay, you're saying you're in a caloric deficit. Let's put that under the microscope and let me validate that as a coach to make sure that's not what the issue is. Yes, you tell me, but let's just spend a couple weeks before I'm going to ask you to spend $1,000 on blood tests and kits and all kinds of supplements. Like let's just make sure that the basics are in order, which don't really cost anything, before I would have you invest in these other things.
Absolutely. And like I said, I just had to bring that up because there's such trending topics that every coach I work with thinks that they need to be well-versed in them. And so if you're telling me that certain topics don't have research to support them, like that's important to know, right? Because it's really easy, like you said charlatan several times, right? It's really easy to aspire to be like X coach and then trust everything X coach says blindly. And then when you follow X coach, everyone else that follows that person says the same thing, right? It's like the spider web, right? It just keeps trickling down. So I'm always curious to know more about that. But moving on to just more of like the practical application and coaches that are listening to this, right? I was asked, several people wanted me to ask you this question, but where is that balance between having knowledge and actually implementing and executing, right? Because I've worked with so many coaches that have come to me and they've invested thousands of dollars into this certification, that course, this and that, whatever. And they've like helped 5 people ever. And they're so stuck in like the learn. So again, I realize that you are, PhD level here, but what advice would you give to these coaches on that balance?
That seems very imbalanced. You've got to help people. And I would say the best thing you could do is work with clients. And I always tell my students, work for free, help out your friend first. Not that you're not learning, but you've got to work with people. You've got to help people, because that's where you're going to get the experience. So yeah, it's, and I feel bad because coaches, they need to, again, especially the good coaches, they want to be evidence-based. They want to do the right thing. So I applaud them for wanting to learn, but you've got to help. You got to at some point apply that. And I think this is your expertise, like, then you have to market your services. So it's not just knowledge. It's not just applying that knowledge to a client. It's having enough of an effective business model so that you can make it a living and help more people. So I feel for coaches. It's tough. It is. And fitness is not, a lot of people, there's a few people in our industry who do very well. Most people don't. And I always tell my students, I want everybody to be a billionaire in this space. One, because I want you to hire me when you are a billionaire. But two, our country needs this. We need great coaches. But what you described is a complete imbalance. Yes, get your certification, but once you get your certification, or once you do one thing, now you've got to put it to use, because you're not going to be in the industry long if you're not making income. So you've got to spend time helping people and your skill set of generating new clients. And again, to that, I would say the best thing, I just told my students this: if you help one person, that's now going to be turned into 2 and then 4. So you don't need a huge following. Some of the wealthiest people I know in the space don't have huge followings, but man, they're good about getting results.
Totally. And that's the thing with, you know, your coaching is your skill set, but you have to learn how to market that skill set, right? And so I'm always working with my clients. Referrals are great, but they're not reliable necessarily, right? Especially for the coaches I'm working with, like they've got several hundred followers, maybe a few thousand, but you know, it's different now than it was in 2014, starting a business on Instagram, right? Like it's just different. And so learning those skills, of course, like I'm with you. But yeah, I think it's finding the confidence to just do it, because people are like, I don't want to mess somebody up. It's like, can you teach somebody how to read a food label? Like, can you just help them make healthier decisions? Like, that's where you start, right? You're not starting with the labs and the complex cases and all of that. But I know that so many of my clients look up to you and ingest your information and what you're putting out there. And they're thinking, I'm not as smart as him. Like, can I even do this? Like, can I even be in this space? Right. Like, it's that comparison, you know, and somebody like you who is, you know, in my opinion, like, I think that you're very well known in this industry. Like, a lot of coaches use you for a source of truth and reason. So, when is the last time that you felt imposter syndrome?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I imposter syndrome related to,
Confidence in what you're doing, where you're going, in your
yeah,
authority, any of that.
okay. So one of the things that I've committed to in the last, let's just say the last 5 years, is social media. So I never liked social media. In fact, I'd say I hated it. And I realized, and this isn't an imposter syndrome, but I think this is an important story that only you can probably help with. I I said the industry is passing me by. I've got to fundamentally do something different because again, I'm doing research, I'm educating students, but I'm not making the impact that I want. So I said, okay, I'm gonna commit to doing Instagram. And I didn't even know, should I do Facebook, Twitter? Like I'm not a social media person. But it seemed like Instagram. I got some counsel from a company, actually a friend who hired a company. They said, hey, if you're in fitness, Instagram seems to be the best one. I'm like, all right, Instagram it is. And just, yeah, every day, 2 hours, first thing in the morning. That's what I fundamentally changed about my life, doing true, false, multiple choice. And why did I do that? Well, one, I'm not Brad Pitt, so I'm like, I'm not really going to put my body on social media, and nobody's doing true, false, multiple choice, so it'll stick out. Plus, I already do this. I make exams for my students, so it was just something that, yes. So from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. for like 2 years, every morning, not Sundays, but 6 out of 7 days per week, just generating true, false, multiple choice, and then other. So I had a system, um, but that's where I would just, yeah, like, oh, right now. Okay. This is where it's real. I want to start doing reels. I bought a course, I bought a subscription. I'm doing all of these education things instead of just making a freaking reel. So I live it the same way, like you're describing fitness coaches that have this barrier. I struggle with the same thing with technology.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, and I asked you that question because coaches will look up to you and think that you don't have a hard day. You don't have days where you doubt what you're doing. And I think it's important to share the vulnerabilities, right? And I was going to ask you about your marketing strategy and how long that took you, right? Because you have a really large following now. When you first started Instagram, what year was that?
I think it was 2018.
Okay.
Um, and I'll say this, I was fully, my plan was to, if nobody followed me, my plan was I'm going to go in and DM 50 people a day and say, hey, I'm a professor of exercise and nutrition. I'm putting out stuff. I just would like you to follow me because I think I'd never had to do that, but that was on my paper. I am going to do that. What happened was early on, the true false, stupid true false and multiple choice, it did kind of take off a little bit because it was, again, nobody else does it. Now, I've had a few people like try to copy it, but they never stick with it because it's a lot of work. One of those posts was 2 hours of my morning at some point. Now I recycle them, change a little bit of things, or keep adding as well. But yeah, so that was the strategy. I was going to just ask an obscene number of people every day, follow me, follow me, follow me.
I
But I
mean,
didn't have to.
it's funny you say that though, because I obviously teach all of the strategy, but people will literally find you and think that guy's never had to struggle with social media. And you're telling me, oh my God, I bought this course on Reels and I suck at it and I've never done it. It's just,
Yeah.
it's nice to hear, right? But I love your true false posts. Seriously. I mean, I see them shared all the time. How long would you say it took you to gain traction with them? Like the first year?
Yeah, it happened pretty quick. The other thing too, I had done several favors, let's say like Lane Norton. So I would always tell him, hey, mention, I didn't even have to ask him, but I had some favors where I would do nice, what I would say, nice things for other people with larger followings. And then they would early on when they would like tag me on something, I noticed, oh, thank you, Lane. Lane was one of those people. Um, but then it got to the point where that no longer mattered. And of course I learned you're never going to build a sustainable like you have to do good stuff. That's the other thing I learned. So I think again, you're the professor here. I think what you have to do is when you have to have good content and you have to do it you have to do it consistently. I don't know if that means every day, but that's my lesson. And again, I have this huge mental block of videos and I did a story the other day and I was so happy. It's like, this sucks. I just did it and put it out there like you're supposed to do. And it did very well. Like I was like, wow.
That's the action works. Heard it here first. But yeah, I mean, and because people see you and what you put out, but it's like they want to hear from you. Even if it's just like a quick pop in, like people want to hear it from your mouth.
Mhm.
So yeah, and in terms of the cadence of how often should you post, it really depends on number one, where you're at in business. Because here's the thing, you could post every day, but if it's crap content that is regurgitated from Google, then no. But to give you perspective, like when I started my business in 2019, I was doing 3 posts a week, and that felt honestly like a lot at the time, whereas now I'm posting twice a day. But again, that's almost a 5-year difference, right? So it just kind of depends, especially with the way the algorithm is and all of that. It's not really even about followers for me. It's about just reach, right? Who am I reaching? And so my content is geared towards, 50% is reach and 50% is nurturing who's already in my like ecosystem, so to speak. So
Yes.
and
Yep.
but content definitely feels like a full-time job sometimes. I know a lot of people hate it. I love it. I my background is in journalism, so I could write anytime, but just thought I'd ask you that. So that's interesting. So one of the questions that one of my clients wanted me to ask you: how do you build authority when you don't have advanced degrees? And I know this is somebody who is probably looking up to you and the lanes and all of that, and somebody who doesn't have the advanced degrees, right? How do you build authority in this space?
Yeah, and I'm not a great person to ask because I have a PhD and that
Sure.
does give you instant credibility,
Mhm.
earned or not. The PhD gets you into rooms or people just will give you credit. And I'm going to say this, there's a lot of PhDs that have not kept up. They don't do the work. And I know people that without even any degree. I mean, I'm a college professor, but you don't need a degree. You need to be passionate to learn. Um, so just because you have a PhD, that means nothing. Are you putting in the work over and over? So how would somebody, and I've never thought about this, my advice would be you probably try to get mentored by somebody who's doing what you're doing, and you learn from them, and this is what I would do. So I would get with somebody, become their assistant, and just make sure, hey, I'm using this person is an authority currently. I'm an understudy, therefore trust me as this person's understudy. That's what I would do. I would I would hitch my wagon to somebody else who's more advanced, and that's well respected, obviously. And that's how I would do it.
I also think too that question is derived from some kind of mental block, right? Somebody is thinking they're not good enough or they don't feel equipped to jump in. And I would say a majority of the coaches that are doing really well, like don't have formal degrees necessarily, right? I would argue that it doesn't always matter. It depends what you want to do, of course. Some degrees are necessary for certain jobs, but a lot of coaching, I mean, it's practical application. And we get so caught up in the weeds of like having to learn all the things. And I also think too, like there's so many great coaches and industry leaders like yourself in the space to where if your entire Instagram feed is the lanes and the Hermoses and you whatever, it's like you just are thinking, am I good enough? Can I do this? Right? Like, can I break into this space? But I also think comparing your day 30 to someone's day, 3,000 is going to set anyone
Yeah.
up for failure.
Yes. Yeah. And another thing I would do for credibility is get a certification. I have a certification, but it doesn't have to be mine. Just get one and believe, I mean, get one that you feel like that you learned and there's your level. Like that's it. I am certified. I have done the work. This organization has vetted me. There's my credential. Now I've helped 3 people or 8 people, which turns into 16 to 32 to 64. Like that's how that works. So your credibility is I've got my credential, I've helped people. Now I'll help other people.
You know, Yes, I agree. I think it's a snowball effect. And I really do think that breaking through imposter syndrome comes down to just doing it. Like you have to just take a step forward. I don't even really use that word that much. I've used it more so on this podcast because I've had clients ask me things that are stemming from that. But to me, anytime I have that moment of, I don't know, I'm a little intimidated, right? Can I do that? That's just like, in my opinion, the mental roadblock of where your knowledge ends, right? Because anytime I level up in business or try something new, I definitely have oh, this kind of feels a little scary, but we're going to do it anyway. And I think you build up that resilience to either push through it or you don't, you stay stuck, right? But just getting another certification every time you feel stuck is not going to push you forward. I do want to ask you, is there any cool study that you're working with right now? Is there any cool research that you're like, oh man, this is like cutting edge. Can't wait until this comes out. Like this is going to be a wild one. Like what are you working on or involved in?
Yeah, so a couple things that we're doing now is we're planning what will be the largest ever reverse diet study. So
Ooh.
we're looking at hundreds and hundreds of people, and this will be a virtual study.
Okay.
Uh, so that we're not confining it to people who live in Tampa that can come to my lab. So we're going to make it, I guess, worldwide. So that's the first time we've done this virtual study approach. I need to mention my research coordinators. I have 3 right now: Gretchen Shelton, Valentina, and Landon Shanahan. Valentina Rodriguez. So those are my 3, and I just lost my other research coordinator. He graduated. His name was Wayne Ayers Creech, so he helped train my current group. So they're working with my research team on designing these studies. And one thing that we just did was we did a survey study of all bodybuilding coaches. So we wanted to get them, since those seem to be the most versed in reverse dieting. So we asked them, how do you do this? What are your strategies? How much? How little? How long? And that's a survey study. And then we're using that data to inform us on how we want to plan or design our actual study. And I say reverse diet, that means a lot to bodybuilders, but essentially what we're doing is, what do you do when the diet is over? That's the question we're answering. So this will be for people who are resistance training, who have access to a DEXA or InBody, who currently are training, who want to lose weight. So we're going to put them on a diet. They have to lose significant amount of body weight. And then our study starts after you lost the weight. We're gonna have a few strategies of what happens after that. How much do we increase? Do we increase all at once, a little bit over time? So that's the main study we're doing. The other one that we're doing, Landon Shanahan is coordinating this one. This is my first foray into this perimenopause space. So this is a case series study, where case series is where you take a handful of people, put them through a trial, and then you just discuss likes and similarities, differences, and how they responded. So I'm thinking we're going to get 8 females, 2 that are premenopausal, 2 that are in menopause, and then 4 that are postmenopausal. And out of those 4 that are postmenopausal, 2 that are on HRT and 2 that are not. And we're going to do the best word is an extreme fat loss study. only 7 days, but 4 days they eat a couple, like 300 calories. So near starvation for 4 days, have them walk 6 hours per day on top of this starvation style diet. Do we see a difference in the body's fat loss response? If we do, does the HRT help? Is being in menopause, is that blocking this? Now, it's not a lot of subjects, so you got to be careful about, making, bold conclusions, but it's something that we want to be very aggressive early and see what we can learn, and then that will inform our next study.
Very fun. Okay. I want to be part of a study. Like, what do you need? Let me know.
Well, when we're going to, as long as you have, you lift weights, if you want to lose body weight, so you have to want to go on a diet, as long as you lift weights and you're willing to let us manipulate your diet and then your post diet, you'll be in. So watch my Instagram and reply to the request to join our study.
We're all gonna commit now. Anyone who listens to this and wants to join it with me, let's do it. That's so funny. So this is just kind of like random topic, but what is something that most people don't know about you that you wish they knew just from looking at your Instagram? Like maybe something that's like a personality trait or something that you just feel like it doesn't come across. You're like, man, I wish more people knew this about me.
Yeah, I would say I think, and I think my students would suggest this, I'm very vanilla on social media. But I'm not, and I'm very not vanilla at all. Now, I am a Christian, so I don't want people to think I'm out doing whatever. So I I am a Christian, so I'm not, pushing old women in front of a moving bus.
Oh my God.
But much, at least not very often. I'm much more opinionated, etc. But I'm a reflection of my students. So if my true self, not that I'm like controversial, but yeah, if more people knew that more how opinionated I was, it would turn some people off, which I don't necessarily care about that. But I'm very sensitive to the fact that my students they need me to be a non-controversial person because I want them to get PhDs, to be coaches, etc. So that would be one thing. I wish I could, not that I wish because I could be, but I'm much more opinionated and not so vanilla in real life. I guess that would be the difference. And again, my students would be the ultimate arbiters of that.
Now, I'm just curious, what is on your playlist when you're working out? What do you listen to when you're training?
Oh, I'm in my late 40s, so what do I have on there? It's what my children would call dad rock. So
Nice.
yeah, so AC/DC. What else do I have on there? Oh, I've been on a Milli Vanilli kick lately. So yeah, Milli Vanilli. That's such a fascinating story. I mean, that's a little dating myself, but man, a cool story.
I was just curious because some people tell me that they listen to podcasts when they work out, and I just think that they're serial killers. I don't get that. I cannot squat to a podcast.
Oh, no, I do that too.
Oh, then you fall in the category.
Yeah. No, it's either podcast or the music. Yes. Yep.
Well, whoever I offended just now, it is what it is. But I personally cannot. I'm just, maybe if it was an upper body day and I wasn't doing much, but if I'm trying to really push some weights, there is no way I think I could do anything heavy to that. Cool. What advice would you give a new coach breaking into this space, aside from getting a mentor or whatever? Like, what advice would you give them to prepare them for just the journey of entrepreneurship?
Whew. I would say work with people. So how many clients, again, I think this is relying on what you were saying earlier. I'm scared to work with people. Well, you've got to work with people. This is a people business. So you already have a mentor, let's say, or if you don't, yeah, you'd get one of them, but work with people, learn. And let's just say you aren't successful. They gain 10 pounds on your weight loss plan. That's great. Not good for them, but that's great. What didn't work well? What did you learn from that? Yes. And I say all this and I need to internalize it for my own social media shortcomings. So I'm a hypocrite.
I think it's important though to fail. Like, someone asked me recently, There's like, God, I feel like I'm failing in business and XYZ. And I will say it was dramatized. The client wasn't failing, but there had been a few weeks back to back of just hard weeks, right? And I think it's really important to understand that you're going to fail, and every single client is not going to be a success story, and not every client's going to love you, and not every client's going to be happy with you. And sometimes it's you, and sometimes it's adherence, whatever it is, but every single person you encounter is a learning opportunity. And as long as you can learn from it, and treat them like data points, not as absolutes, then you'll be okay. But I think a lot of coaches we love what we do, and we lead with emotion versus, data and things of that nature. So yeah, awesome. Is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't?
No, I don't think so. No, I loved your questions. These are
Perfect.
questions that I've never gotten before, so I love it.
Well, I'm going to link your Instagram in the show notes and anything else you'd like me to. So if you guys want to, play true or false with me on a daily basis, then you're going to know where to do that. Bill Campbell, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for having me.